Google has just rolled out Daily Listen, an experimental AI feature where it'll take all of your search history and browsing data and it'll customize it into a 5-minute podcast just for you.
OpenAI launched a new beta feature for ChatGPT called Tasks that lets users schedule future actions and reminders.
Are these AI providers ever going to find the right business model? It's Google and Microsoft shifting gears when it comes to how they charge for their AI features.
How cheap can you build an AI model for? UC Berkeley's Nova Sky team announced that they had released a 32 billion Sky T1 32B preview.
Can AI solve the mysteries of gene expression? Columbia's GET model is trying to do just that.
Nvidia out this week with a whole series of announcements about partnerships and products in the healthcare space.
The United States just introduced some unprecedented export controls on AI chips.
Former Google researcher Francois Cholet has formed a new AI company aiming for artificial general intelligence named Nvidia. Welcome back to What the AI, the podcast where we decode the latest in artificial intelligence. I'm Jeff Keltner.
And I'm Annie Delgado.
How you doing, Annie?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well. It's a nice sunny Friday down here, so that's good.
Sunny Friday, 3-day weekend. It's always exciting to have a 3-day weekend. You got any big plans?
I have the plan to go watch a 3-day club volleyball tournament for my high school son. So, as many things in life at this stage dictated by the needs of the children. You have any big plans?
My big plans are similar. I'm watching 5th grade flag football. So that'll be my Sunday for sure. They do a really awesome flag football league in my town where there's like a kind of practice in the game at the same day. So this is only week 2, but it's pretty cool.
Practice and game in the same day?
Yeah, so it's just a 1-day-a-week thing, which is pretty nice as far as kid sports goes. But they show up, they do their practice, and then they go straight on to their game, which is cool.
Oh, now I'm jealous. I need kid sports to work that way, not the random
the
practice at
3-day.
7:30 p.m. on Tuesday and 9 p.m. on Thursday and whatever. Like, that sounds great. I love it. And flag football, it's a fun sport. It surprised me how different it feels than football in many ways. It's like a very different strategy and style of play. It's very cool.
It's really fun, yeah. My son's other big sport is Little League, so it's decidedly different in terms of level of action on the field. Little League is a little bit slower and also just time. Like, you get it all done in 2 hours on a Sunday versus Little League, you can be out there for a 3-hour game
Oh,
a couple times a week. So
yeah. Flag football, very fast paced. That's fun.
for sure. So Jeff, do you need more daily podcasts in your life?
No, no, I
Oh,
don't.
well, bummer. But if you did, or some people might, Google has just rolled out something called Daily Listen. This is something that's available in their search labs. And it's basically an experimental AI feature where it'll take all of your search history and interests and browsing data, and it'll customize it into a 5-minute personalized podcast just for you. So this was a recent announcement from Google this last week.
Interesting. So it looks through your search history and just like comes up with, here's what Annie wants to know for this week.
It does. So it basically just like looks at all of the things that you're searching for and content you're interacting with on Google, and it'll serve up just a 5-minute overview with AI podcast hosts, kind of like we've talked about before with Notebook LM. But it's really just for you. It's not something that's available broadly. So it's pretty cool.
Have you gotten to try it out?
So I was excited to try it out, and I went straight to Search LM to try it out. And it turns out I am not one of the users that is selected to test the feature. So all I got to do was sort of listen to the snippet that it has that was like an example. But I could see this being fun for people, although for some people it might be a weird self-reflection moment looking in the mirror in terms of what your search history was the day before and what it thinks that you want to hear about in your podcast. So
I was also on the experiment on the list of, not yet on the list of people to whom this has been given access. But I actually had an idea very similar to this with one of our colleagues that we were playing with, like an automatic podcast. And just, what am I interested in? I want to know my local news. I want to know national news. These are my sports teams. I need to know about AI. So I'll be really curious when it comes out how well it works. We'll see. Maybe we've been not talking nicely enough about Google on this podcast, and so we didn't they kept us off the early access list for the daily listen.
Yeah, maybe we're the problem. What one thing it seems hard to me to accomplish with this feature is to get everything you might be interested in, like you just talked about your feed and that type of stuff, in only 5 minutes in a podcast style, right? It's not like a rapid fire read the headlines, but a conversation in 5 minutes. It's you can't fit a ton in there.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll be very curious how this evolves because it could be certainly I don't need more podcasts, but if I could have fewer podcasts that were better targeted and linked into what I want, like one daily listen would be really interesting if it worked well.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we always try to keep our podcast under like 40 minutes and have a hard time. So if they can do it in 5, that'd be pretty good.
AI is better following instructions than we are, apparently, Annie.
Fair enough.
The question, we talked a lot about AI agents last week. Are AI agents finally here? We'll see. OpenAI this week launched a new beta feature for ChatGPT called Tasks that lets users schedule future actions and reminders. So maybe the first step of agents.
Well, so what do they actually do that is, agentic? What do you think that looks
It's
like?
interesting. So they really allow you to schedule essentially a prompt to run and notify you on your phone or via email or desktop notifications that it's been there. One of the examples they mentioned, which is pretty funny, was a daily news brief or roundup, kind of like the 5 minute
Kinda
thing.
like the 5-minute podcast.
So that felt agent. I mean, in the sense that that's like going out, researching news, curating, and then populating and pushing to you that information. It did feel kind of agentic to me, that concept. You can also do things like remind me at 6 o'clock to do this and just get a notification, very Siri reminders like simple stuff. But the kind of more newsfeedy thing felt a little more agentic.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you try the newsfeed?
So I tried to set up one, and I've had 2 fails in it so far. The first, it just literally came back and said, "Sorry, didn't run, failure. Try better. Better luck next time." And I went, "Okay, not a great first run." And then I said, "Well, give me a 5 p.m." So I did my morning news brief didn't run, so I just went back in and said, "Well, give me something at 5 p.m. Maybe they'll have fixed the problem and give me the what happened today." And I gave it specific instructions, right? Like national news, tech news, Southern California news. And, it came back and I was disappointed because it only found one national news story worth mentioning, which was Urban Meyer's introduction into the College Football Hall of Fame. And I kind of thought, there's a lot going on in the world. I'm not sure if they're only going to mention one story. And I know I'm going to take some hate from some of our colleagues from Ohio were telling me maybe that's exactly the top story, Jeff. This is important news. But I felt like maybe the curation feature not quite there yet on the newsletter from ChatGPT's tasks just yet.
Well, or maybe this is the uncomfortable self-reflective mirror that it thought that was the only one you would care about.
But yeah, except I don't ever ask about college football. It's not a thing I'm interested in. So poor targeting either way.
I was gonna
It's
say,
not
I've
come
I've
up.
never known this about you, but maybe you have all this secret search history and passion for college football that I'm not aware of. I don't know.
No, no, not that's not what happened. So I don't. Well, we'll see if they get this one better. But certainly useful for like if you want things that ChatGPT is good at. But it seems like news curation not yet on their list.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the thing about this that I thought was the most exciting or potential for the future in terms of, moving towards the agent is the event-based triggers. Did you play around with that at all?
They don't have those yet, but that was the 2 things that came to me when I saw it. I was like, "Oh, I really want this to have tools." Increasingly, my Chat GPT usage, I want to have tools, like, to be able to add something to my calendar or look in my email or add something to my task list. So, that was my first, like, "Oh, this would be really cool if it could send
Yeah.
an email every day at X or add a task, everything." And then to your point, event-based triggers like, "Oh, let's just say I care about company news. When there's after an earnings call, send me the summary of it, right? Or if a stock price hits X, or when this team plays, I don't want a daily news brief. I want to know about, the 4 tennis grand slams because I watch a lot of tennis and like tell me when those are going on, but otherwise don't. And they don't quite have those yet, but you kind of see as they keep iterating on this thing, you kind of see like, oh man, with a few tweaks and a few added features, it would be a really cool capability.
Yeah, for sure. I think it could be a huge efficiency gain at work if you could figure out how to integrate this type of thing with, like, your email. So, how much at work do we spend time just checking if somebody responded to something, and then we know when they respond, we have to do something else, but we just keep having to go back and check, and if instead something like this could just catalog, "Here's all the responses, and here's your next action item," that would be, I think, a big time saver, minimizing follow-up and so on and so forth.
Be a huge time saver. I've been using a strange feature of Chat, not strange, a strange use case of ChatGPT that I found on Twitter through another podcaster named Patrick O'Shaughnessy. Got a great podcast called Invest Like the Best. But he actually has this instructions and he does essentially a daily audio note. So he just kind of blathers 10 minutes and the instructions are like, find the sentiment, find the themes. If I talk about a message, start drafting a sample of that message. If I mention a task for myself, like, and then it'll respond to his audio note with all of the tasks. But I was like, how cool would it be if you could have, like, you sat down for 10 minutes, talk to ChatGPT in the morning that actually put tasks on your thing, drafted messages. You'd open up your email and a draft message would be there. And it actually drafted messages for me, but it was just text in the chat history that I could copy and paste into email. It wasn't, hey, yeah, I drafted a calendar invite, looked at where people were available and sent something out. Like that would be all of a sudden that becomes so powerful. And I immediately with tasks thought of those, oh, that kind of use case or the tasks kind of use case with those integrations would be really, really powerful to have. And I imagine are not that far away because it's not a crazy hard thing for these guys to add some of those capabilities.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be game changing. Well, speaking of game changing, let's talk business models, something we've talked about a bit before, but are these AI providers ever going to find the right business model? It seems like there's a lot of a lot of change and a lot of iteration that is happening on this front. But so both Google and Microsoft shifting gears when it comes to how they charge for their AI features.
All right. So tell me what shifting gears, Google and Microsoft, what do they do? What do they announce?
Well, so one of the things we've talked about before for Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude, Perplexity, et cetera, everybody was sort of just charging $20 a month. So if you wanted access to all these different models, it's $20 a pop. Google actually added the Gemini features, into the docs and Gmail in their workspace for no additional charge. And instead of charging the $20 a month, they just raised the overall price of the workspace $2, and everybody has access to it. So I think that actually is going to maybe be a accelerant. More
Yeah, that's
people
a
are going to use
fascinating
it.
change. Well,
I
yeah,
think
more
so.
people are gonna have it. Nobody, I don't know, you're not gonna walk away from being a Gmail company and a Docs company over $2 a month. Like, it's just so now everybody's got it, but it clearly said that people weren't willing to pay the extra 20. I mean, there's some message there that the willingness to pay at the corporate level was not maybe as high as they were hoping.
I think that that's exactly right, and so $2 a month is palatable, $20 a month is not palatable, and so, you can raise the price for everybody, and then more people are gonna use the tool because it's just there and it's, able for them to try it. Microsoft actually, though, is, going lower than $2 a month, and they're going free. So, they're
Free.
offering yeah, free Copilot chat to all of their, Microsoft 365 users. So, they'll basically, have the chat version of the tool paying as part of the full version, and they'll get integration into their actual Microsoft platform. So Google's $2 a month extra, Microsoft part of the deal.
Part of the deal. Yeah, I was reading about this, and now that I guess the chat version, like if you want to look at a Word doc or Excel file, you got to like upload it in chat, just like it's Chat GPT. And then you could pay I forget what the extra is, but for the full Copilot that's like integrated into your Excel experience. But like, again, it seems like they're really trying to lower the bar for people starting to use this and seeing the value and maybe grow from there. But it seems like that the pricing was a barrier for people getting started with it. So that's a big shift in business models for both of these guys from a large charge up to having a substantial number of features that are free or now just included at the higher price, I guess, for Google, and not quite free.
Yeah, I think it's a signal of how people sort of view the future of AI. It's not going to be some niche thing that you only use if are a super user, early adopter, willing to pay. It's really something that everybody is going to be using and really be widespread available. So I think that we're seeing that inevitability reflected in the business model that these guys are choosing.
Yeah. Well, again, those are some of the enterprise guys with the kind of basic stuff, but we'll see if we see any more changes from ChatGPT or Anthropic or the kind of $20 a month consumer subscription. That seems to be pretty stable for now, but I'm going to bet that 2025 might be a year of some new business models coming out too.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about money, we talked about less expensive training of models last week. This week, UC Berkeley challenging us to know how cheap can you build an AI model for. They announced a kind of a whole new version of cheap training of models this week, which was kind of mind blowing.
Okay. You've piqued my interest. What do they do?
The UC Berkeley's Nova Sky team announced that they had released a 32 billion, what is it called, Sky T1 32B preview,
Okay.
fully open source reasoning model that competes with like OpenAI's O1, at least in some facets. And They trained it in 19 hours on 8 GPUs for 450.
Million?
Not million, not billion, just $450. I mean, shoot, Annie, I can train my AI models now apparently on my home PC. 450 is affordable even for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's wild. I think that there's been so much discussion about the cost and how expensive it is AI is building the models, developing the models. These guys are sort of like flipping the script on that. $450 in 19 hours. How do you know how is that even possible?
I'd love to get some of the details on how it's possible, but it just really seems to fit this pattern we've seen of when you shrink down the range of things you're trying to do. If you say, I really want this to be good at coding. I mean, that's if you think about what they're trying to do with the latest frontier models, they're trying to build a general intelligence that can answer any kind of question about anything. You know, you ask it about quantum physics and it'll explain it to you. And you ask it about foreign policy and international, explain that to you. And if you just kind of limit what you want it to be really good at, and take some of the current models to generate artificial training data that's focused on what you want, then it turns out you can make a much smaller model and train it much more efficiently. And I really wonder if this is what the future is going to look like in terms of a lot of use cases. Like for many of the use cases we're talking about, you don't need a broadly intelligent capability. You need a very specifically intelligent capability, and 450 sounds a lot better than the training costs for these other models.
For sure. And I think, when we first started chatting about this and I started learning about it, the idea of the synthetic training data freaked me out at first because I was thinking if you have all this AI generated data used to train AI, is it just going to be a race to the bottom and these things are going to be, not so good? But as I was doing more research about it, one of the sort of core features of these, techniques that they're employing in the reasoning models is that the reasoning models can fact check themselves, right? So unlike the LLMs that can't reason and can't fact check and don't know how many R's there are in strawberry, these ones can fact check themselves. So even with that synthetic data, they're able to, be fairly accurate for the use case that they're built for.
The synthetic data is a really interesting topic. I was pretty skeptical as well, and I still am in the sense that I don't think we're going to make a broadly smarter model. You're not going to take GPT-5 or 4.0 or whatever the best model of the time is and go, generate me some more data to make yourself smarter because it kind of inherently can't, right? Like you can't generate the data for itself to become smarter than it already is. It just feels very self-limiting. But if you say, hey, change that use case to make me some data that can train a model that's almost as smart of you, but much smaller and targeted, well, that seems like actually a pretty good use case for those models. So the idea that you can get more specific training data sets to target the training of a smaller, more targeted, more efficient model out of a larger frontier model makes a lot of sense. I'm still pretty skeptical that you're going to use that kind of technique to push the state of the art, the most advanced models to a new place than it's been. That just feels unlikely to me to be a realistic thing that's going to happen, at least in these LLMs. Maybe in video generation or other things, you've got some capabilities to do that. But it just feels to me like you can't bring more intelligence out of the intelligence you have. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, we've talked a lot about the opportunities for AI to really solve some of the world's problems. And I think one of the biggest opportunities that we see over and over again is in the healthcare field. So, question: can AI solve the mysteries of gene expression? Columbia's GET model is trying to do just that. So that'll be interesting thing to watch.
What is a GET model, Annie? I've heard a lot of model types. I've not heard GET. What is GET? What does this thing do?
So GET it refers to General Expression Transformer, and it actually is a model that can predict gene expression in any human cell. So it's trained on over 1.3 million cells from normal tissues, and it can understand the gene behavior even in cell types it hasn't seen before. And so there's just, you can imagine in the medical field, in the research field, a lot of unlock and a speed of research that this type of model could allow for.
Yeah, it's one of those areas where we learned a lot about genes and genetics, but we still really don't understand that much about how this amazingly complex sequence of numbers or, DNA, RNA actually translates into what genes are expressed, like what gives you certain features and characteristics. And it seems like a problem that's well suited to AI. So pretty cool to hear this happening. Are these predictions considered reliable? Like, are they accurate?
Well, I think this is always the question that you and I talk about, which is it how accurate is it relative to whatever we have today? So the lab results match, or these predictions by the model match the lab results 94% of the time, that seems pretty good to me. That's pretty accurate. And I mean,
That's remarkable.
obviously, it'd be nice to get to 99%, but 94 is the starting point. It seems like a pretty good spot to iterate from.
Yeah, I would take that. So, are there real world applications? What are they doing with this kind of GET model type? Where is it being utilized?
I mean, I think the main places are the applications in real world problems, right? So things like uncovering the mechanisms that drive childhood leukemia, looking at different potential for disease research and treatment development for some of those types of illnesses is really what we hope that this type of technology could unlock.
I feel like every week we've got some announcements in the space of AI and healthcare, and I got to be honest. My wife, a physician who's also studies AI, so I'm often emailing her articles, going, "I don't understand the words in this one. Can you explain to me what's going on?" There was a few more that we'll probably cover next week that fit into that category, but very exciting stuff coming in the healthcare space.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Why while we're on the healthcare topic, is there anything that AI is not trying to do in healthcare? Nvidia out this week with a whole series of announcements about partnerships and products specifically in the healthcare space. So a very exciting time, I guess, for healthcare, not just the GET, but also a bunch of Nvidia work.
Yeah, this was like their own little 12 days of launches like ChatGPT did. Nvidia had all kinds of announcements. But so run it through for me. What did we hear?
There's a lot here, but let's go through them because I don't think we're going to go into great depth in any of these, being non-healthcare experts. But Nvidia working with the Arc Institute to collaborate on open source AI models for DNA, RNA, and protein analysis. So kind of again that fundamental genetics and how those are expressed into proteins. Working with IQVIA, leveraging AI Foundry to build models on, they said, 64 petabytes of data to streamline clinical trials and research. This has always been a really fascinating area for me. If you could digitize healthcare records, could you just essentially ask the thing that we have to run a clinical trial for of the data that we have and really simplify the process of learning? Because we're essentially running trials all the time and we have different treatments in the real world. Partnering with Mayo Clinic, so a pretty big name in healthcare, to deploy AI about evaluating pathology slides. So the kind of slides you get of biopsies of various sorts to actually be better at diagnosis. This is one of those areas that you felt was going to be, it's kind of image recognition, one of the first core AI use cases. And so part of the problem, as I know in that space, has been lack of data and consistency of data and breadth of data. So, for instance, in dermatology, you got way too much skin of certain skin tones in the data sets and not enough of others, and that causes accuracy issues. So, they partnered with Mayo Clinic. Really interesting in the pathology space to start being able to use those tests to more accurately diagnose disease. And then finally, Mayo Clinic also partnering with Microsoft to develop AI foundational models for, again, that medical imaging genomic data to hopefully get to more personalized medicine, faster diagnoses, and more precise treatments. Because of course, some treatments more effective on some kinds of patients than others. And so the more they can get down to, hey, here's Annie, which treatments will work for not just her disease, but for her genetics, her personality, her background, her medical history, that gets really valuable in terms of speeding up the ability to treat and diagnose diseases. So geez, that's a lot. But there you go. Lots of announcements from NVIDIA and a variety of partners this week in the healthcare space.
That is a lot to love in those announcements. What are the things that you are the most important takeaways from you, especially I'm assuming having spoken with your wife about some of these also?
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing her mind blown when we talk about some of these things because my mind gets blown mostly because I start using words I don't understand really quick. And I go, is this a big deal or not? And so when she goes, "Oh my God, that's incredible," then I'm like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And there's some really cool stuff in here. The key things to me is I get a little tired about reading. No offense, and we will keep podcasting about it, so don't go away. But the OpenAI ChatGPT versus Anthropic Claude versus Google Gemini LLM kind of thing, because it's an aspect of AI, but I feel like too often it feels like the whole story. And so to see companies like Nvidia really investing in, what I would call more practical real world things, not just newer LLMs, but really getting into the nuts and bolts of the problems, the challenges facing humanity, things like healthcare. That's, I think, really exciting. And to remember that these models are not just there to kind of give us intelligence in the textual format, but can do amazing things in real world applications. To me, that's really the amazing thing that we see out of this. And it just makes me excited for what the next couple of years can hold in this kind of space.
Yeah, 100%. That is like, a lot of times people are talking about AI making us more efficient and all this stuff and how it can optimize us, but really it can also just like take us to the next level on some of our biggest problems here. So, it's going to be exciting to watch.
I'm sure it's gonna take years for this. I mean, healthcare, very regulated space. You gotta do trials and tests but, it just feels like the beginning of something really big and important, especially when you see, Microsoft getting involved, Nvidia getting involved, organizations like the Mayo Clinic that have, great reputations, lots of great researchers, lots of great data that can be used to train and test these models. Just makes you think like there's really something out there, that's gonna be pretty important that's coming in the future. So, exciting times.
Exciting times. Well, we've talked before about not talking politics on the podcast, but we do like to talk policy. So there's some policy news out there too. Stick with me. I'm not going to bore you.
All right, give it to me, Andy. What's the policy news? What do we got?
All right. So the United States just introduced some unprecedented export controls on AI chips.
Really? So, okay. What are the control? What are we talking about? Like this, and I want to get into a minute. Tell me about the details first. But then this seems like interesting timing. We're recording on a Friday. We got a new administration starting on Monday, literally 3 days from now. It's a fascinating time. So I want to get into that. But first, start off with like, what is this? What are they doing? What kind of controls?
Yeah, so it's effectively takes the sort of world landscape and it breaks countries into a green, yellow, red system. So the green system are our allies who we will share AI chips with frequently and with no sort of restrictions. The red are the people with whom we will share nothing. And there is, the heaviest thing requirements around or restrictions around, and then the yellow are sort of, I would say, the maybe proceed with caution countries, and these are the ones that you can share, but with some extra sort of red tape. You have to get approval. They have to have certain policies and security protocols in place for us to be able to share with them. So that's effectively what happens. Small list of green countries, small list of red countries, and a lot of yellow countries.
I'm assuming China's in the red. I mean, I feel like the big geopolitical rival right now and the big concern in AI is China kind of the core of the red block, so to speak?
China, Russia, North Korea, the ones you'd expect.
Yeah, yeah, the people we'd expect, and this is applying to kind of most advanced chips, models. What are the parts of this that are really being, implicated?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the GPUs, the AI components. I think models too, but basically it sort of dovetails from the conversation we had last week. Seems like what they're trying to achieve here is keeping the US as the front runner and leader in AI development, but then also trying to mitigate some of the national security controls that would come from the power of AI falling into the wrong hands. And so it's sort of a dual focus there to try to solve both of those things. So that's the purpose or that's the objective. But
Yeah, yeah.
your point on the timing being maybe not so great is well made. So
Do yeah, I'll be very curious to see how they do it. I mean, part of this feels very America first, what I might expect from the incoming administration more than the outgoing, which was interesting. I'm curious how much of that you see, in this in what we expect people to do in response to it. It's gonna be a fascinating I mean, this is perceived as such a major technology. These kind of limitations, I think, are gonna be seen as quite combative.
yeah, I think so. And the America First component, I mean, you're right. We're gonna see obviously this just got announced. So the incoming administration is gonna have to decide if they're keeping it, tossing it away, keeping parts of it. The America First component is really that 50%, the requirements dictate that these companies like Microsoft, Amazon, et cetera, have to keep 50% of their computing within the US borders. So that is
Wow.
really a pretty clear America First uh, component of the requirements. But the sort of slowdown in competition that comes from having the extra red tape to be able to share data, share information, collaborate, et cetera, that's the part that, people who don't support this policy are really upset about, right? Is like, hey, this is sort of a race and we need to all be sort of collectively working together as a world on this and not as individual countries. And this sort of flies in the face of that a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what the new administration thinks of these types of restrictions.
I think this podcast will land the day after the inauguration, so we're kind of right there in that interesting time, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. I was surprised. I knew there were some restrictions in place before, and I guess there were a number of ways people were cheating those. And there was all talk about how you could buy Nvidia GPUs in the black market in China. It sounded honestly like open air markets. People were walking around buying GPUs off the street, which was kind of crazy. But trying to really lock down the ability to find some of that technology outside of the countries we consider friendly, which is kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, well, like you said, this podcast will be the day after the inauguration, but I don't predict that we will know the outcome of this one that quite that early. So it'll be a
No,
while.
probably not.
Yeah.
Well, let's end with an interesting one I thought, which was, does the world need another AI startup? Do we need more people aiming for artificial general intelligence? And at least one person thinks so. Former Google researcher Francois Chollet has formed a new AI company aiming for artificial general intelligence named NDEA. I think that's India, but haven't heard the pronunciation said out loud. So there you go.
India. Okay, so as you mentioned, it's a somewhat crowded-ish space. How are they planning to separate themselves from the pack?
Well, Francoise is pretty well known in the space, and so comes with a lot of credibility. She built the very popular Keras framework from Google, and has also helped develop the ARC AGI kind of benchmarking, which is one of the benchmarks that most models have not done well at. Although reportedly OpenAI's O3 model better at and getting much higher scores on. But they really are leaning into some of the inference time and the different training methodologies. The belief that we're not just going to throw large scale data at the LLM architecture and win, that there is some fundamental changes to the architecture needed. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we've seen kind of a trend of that going on, and interesting to see startup with really brand names who are kind of from their founding believing that there's a path outside of what's gotten us to the GPT 4.0, Gemini 2.0 kind of level that is needed to take us to the next level. Um, It'd be interesting to see if that helps them kind of think about and approach differently what it takes to get to the next level.
Yeah, do you think is this the team? Is there any reason do you think that are you bullish on this, I guess is my question?
I think I am bull I mean, I am bullish because I increasingly agree with the perspective that that we're not just gonna throw more data at what we have today to get to where we're going. There's, some architectures being announced. One of them came out of Google that we didn't get to talk about, maybe next week. I haven't read the paper yet, called Titans, but that are saying, "Hey, we're gonna need to add memory." Like, the idea that one of the big things that you look at for human intelligence versus artificial intelligence is, like, we learn from every experience. And artificial intelligence today, learns once, and then if it gets something wrong, it just keeps getting it wrong. Like, it doesn't learn from its real-time experiences, what we call inference. When it's giving you answers and you say, "That's the wrong answer, do it again," it doesn't get smarter for the future. It just kinda, like, can remember that maybe in the moment, but not long term. That seems like a fundamental, like, misunderstanding of how intelligence works and operates for the system to be developed like that. And I think that's one of the points that they make in their announcements. How do you get more real-time learning, real-time adaptation? And so the idea that that you need maybe a new start and a fresh perspective on how to do that, I think is really true. And as crazy as it is to call OpenAI, um, an old company or whatever, like, these companies that have gotten this far have done it by investing in a particular approach. And it can be hard to take what is now a large organization and say, "Hey, that approach that we've been investing so heavily in, like, maybe that's not the thing." And it got us here, but it won't get us there. And so, fresh eyes, fresh perspective, investment in new approaches, I think has got some real legs for it. So I'm optimistic to see what they come up with. And whatever. If they waste a bunch of venture capitalist money in the meantime, I think that's okay. I'm okay with that. That's a good use of money.
Do you know what are they sort of focused on? What are the sort of first use cases that they're leaning into?
They haven't announced a lot, but they did describe what they were hoping to build as a, quote, "factory for rapid scientific advancement." So, to what we were saying earlier, not just focused on the kind of general chatbot AI, generally smart, but something, and Sam Altman has talked about this a lot as well, but you don't see the focus necessarily in what you see from ChatGPT, which is kind of the medical stuff we were talking about, or the material science things that we've talked about earlier with Microsoft building models to help build better materials for construction or energy storage or that kind of thing. I think they're really focused on how do we use the AIs to maybe not just design the next best thing, but to, in partnership with humans that are researching that spaces, enable us to move much faster through the scientific advancement process. And to me, that, again, that's the most exciting. Is like, I like the smart chatbot. It's fun. It'll be great when it can read my email and draft emails for me, and that will be great. But when you start talking about, the fundamental challenges around energy or healthcare or the environment that we face as a civilization, like the idea of startups that are trying to build intelligent models targeting that, I mean, that's got to be when you get the most excited about the opportunity. So that to me was a very cool focus for them to take.
I totally agree. I think that's the theme of this week is the exciting advancements in science, medicine, and all of the potential applications in other scientific areas as well.
Yeah, I think we'll take that over tasks any day, although I'd like it if tasks did a little better job. But yeah, I think that's the thing. And hopefully 2025, I'm hopeful that this will be the year where we go from the kind of the basic iteration on the foundational models and technologies and say, hey, how do we start really doing this in the real world on interesting problems? And if we can do that, I think it's sky's the limit. It should be a great year.
Should be a great year. A quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Upstart, the leading AI lending marketplace that connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products. Their platform includes personal loans, automated retail and refinance loans, home equity lines of credit, and small dollar relief loans. For more information, head over to www.upstart.com. Well, I hope you have a great weekend and enjoy the volleyball tournament.
Enjoy the flag football. Enjoy a couple of days off, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
This podcast is brought to you by Upstart. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the fundamentals of AI, check out the AI Certification for Financial Services course Upstart released at aicertification.upstart.com. Again, that's aicertification.upstart.com. If you like this episode, please leave us a rating or review. It's the best way to help others find us. And finally, if you have topics you'd like to see covered or questions you'd like to have answered, drop us a line at email@whattheai.fm. That's it. We'll see you guys next time.